funny, the things that you remember. A mix of small things, making up a lifetime.
It felt like we were the only people in the world.
How are we supposed to go on? People talk about getting closure, but his story was only half written.
I've let myself lose track of what I want after everything we've been through.
Welcome, everybody. We have SassyBot here, the creator and developer of Fragments of Him. We are going to be interviewing him today on how the creation of the game, his career in the video game industry in general, and promoting his game. I'd like to welcome Matta.
Hi,
sir.
Hello, everyone.
And my cohort, Heather.
Hi.
So, diving right in, Matta, I would like to know, what is your experience in the video game field, and what led you to creating a game that's kind of a visual experience?
Okay, so I've been making video games in one way or another for about 15 years. I started off around 2000, 2001 with my own website where I was making just silly animations, and I was using Flash at the time. And you needed to program the buttons to make all the animations work, to loop and stuff like that. And that got me started in programming. And over the next few years, I ended up doing freelance work for people like MTV, Channel 4 in the UK, Flex Tech, loads of people. I was making games and animations and selling merchandise based on that stuff. I was also studying for a PhD at the same time. When I finished the PhD, I decided to go into the industry full time. So I then worked for Criterion on Burnout Paradise. So I was one of the designers on that. After that, I worked for Rebellion in Oxford in the UK. Brilliant bunch of people, really nice to work with as well. And I was one of the lead campaign designers for the Marine campaign in Aliens vs Predator, as well as being the main writer on Aliens vs Predator. I also worked on a tiny little sports game called PDC World Championship Darts Pro Tour. It's a long one, which probably nobody's ever played, but I was quite proud of the work we did on that as well. After that, I've been teaching at NHTV University in the Netherlands for about 5 years now, and I've been teaching games design, narrative design, everything from interface design, interaction design, feedback systems, all those kind of stuff, through to level design, so how you control a space, how you control player movement, balancing that with mechanics, and of course narrative design. Which is kind of part of what led me to make Fragments of Him in the first place. Because I've been teaching about narrative design and going, well, nobody ever seems to set games in the real world. How do we make an experience which is making a cup of tea or getting ready for the day into a gameplay experience? Whether this game has answered that question or not is another question entirely, but I think it was an interesting thing to try to do anyway. I agree. A lot of people seem to enjoy the experience. Not everybody does, but that's life, isn't it?
It is. So if I may ask, with the creation of this game, I am curious to what games did you play when you were younger, and what kind of inspired you to that? What inspired you to get to this point that you're at now?
Ooh, good question. Okay, so some of the games I really liked playing when I was a kid, and I've been playing for, it's well over 30 years now. So I started off from the Spectrum, the Sinclair Spectrum, in about 1983. I think I got mine, maybe 84, mine in 82, around about that time, as the Spectrum had come out fairly recently. A game called Dizzy is one that sticks in my head by the Codemasters. You played an egg with boxing gloves, and it was a puzzle platformer, and you had to roll around to try and pick up objects and solve puzzles. I just really liked the world. I liked the puzzles. I liked I liked everything about it. It was a lot of fun. I tried some of the early 3D things that were going on back then, but they weren't particularly good. But it was very exciting when things got more developed. I played on the Super Nintendo a hell of a lot. I had Mega Drive. There's a game called Wings of War, also called Gynog, depending on where you've pronounced, where you got it from. It was a side-scrolling shooter, insanely hard, and one of my greatest achievements in gaming is having completed that on the hardest difficulty setting.
Oh, way to go.
F-Zero on the Super Nintendo on Grandmaster, which I was very happy about. But you know, I've loved a lot of games over the years, from platformers through to racing and through to narrative stuff. So things like Prince of Persia, Sands of Time, brilliant game. Loved the level design in it. Combat design was, I think the third one really nailed the combat design, but the first one, I think the writing in it, the acting, the storytelling was fantastic, and the level design in particular, that first one was amazing. But I tend to go back to that game for the story. I've had fun with those levels, but I don't feel like I need to learn those levels again. But the story always brought me back. And obviously when people like Naughty Dog started doing such a good job with storytelling, that was kind of inspirational. We can do this. And I played the early Half-Life 2 mod of Dear Esther, so the very first version of it before it got sort of made more pretty and not breakable like the original one was, quite easy to break. But that actually for me was very inspiring on the way it was trying to do something different and be very minimalist. I think we see how that kind of design tradition was continued in games like Journey, where Journey really is a question about how much can we take out of the game and keep it interesting. Flower, again, was if we take away timers and scores and stuff like that, how do we keep the game interesting and an emotional experience, an involving experience? So those are the kind of things that were inspiring me in terms of design aesthetic, as well as a little bit of the storytelling.
That's terrific. Journey and Flower are both really good games, and I agree with you completely on what you just said. So, stepping into Fragments of Him, Heather, would you like to ask the first question?
I would. I actually was the one that reviewed the game, so I'm actually really excited to be here. Yeah. Well, one thing was that the emotions in the game just really seemed so raw, especially like Harry, the boyfriend, or I guess the would-be fiance, like he really was, deeply feeling a lot of anguish. And I just wonder, like, how much of this is rooted in reality? Was this based on an actual experience? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, no, of course not. I wouldn't be doing an interview like this if I was awkward about it. Basically, it is fiction, but the emotions aren't. So I have not lost a partner in an accident like that, thankfully, and I long may that continue. There's some wood over here I'm touching for superstitious reasons.
My first assumption.
But the emotions of it are real. So I've lost far too many friends, far too young. Accidents, sometimes not accidents, illness, things like that. So and I'm sadly familiar with that experience of you see somebody one day and then you find out the next day they're not there anymore. And that it's different, I think, when you lose an elderly relative and you know it's coming and you've possibly been prepared for it for years. But when it's a friend who's your own age and you're young and then suddenly they're gone, that experience is very, very different. But something else also that inspired me a little bit and inspired the emotions, should I say, is a breakup from a relationship. And sometimes those can kind of come out the blue at you a little bit. And that sense of unexpected loss of the future together, that can actually be something which is sometimes quite similar to that feeling of grief. I've mentioned it a couple of other sort of times before with other conversations with people, but it's, I think you're not just mourning that it's ended. I think you're mourning this lost future you had in mind. This idea that you had of who you would be together in the future and how you'd spend your time together in the future. And I think you're mourning both the loss of what's happened and the reason it's happened, but you're also mourning that loss as well. So talking about how that sense of loss can come across and different ways that can affect you, I think that's really kind of what I've channeled into the script there. So there is some real loss real people. There's also loss of relationships as well, which has inspired some of the emotions in there.
So you could almost consider it's nonfiction, only on the basis that it is. There's true emotion put into it. It's just it's not directly based on something that happened.
Yeah, I think it's
not
funny.
An exact experience.
Yeah, well, we have this conversation quite often, actually, in interviews about this game, and one of the things that always fascinates me is that you wouldn't go to an author and go, "Oh, wow, so have you had this inspired by your real life?" It's assumed that when you talk to an author of a book or a play or something like that, if it's a drama, you assume that it is partly inspired by their real life. There is that intrinsic assumption within there. But in the video game industry, I've had people say to me, "Oh, it's very brave to use your own emotions like that." I go, is it? I'm just trying to write a really good story. I'm just trying to write a really heartfelt story that I believe is worth telling. And I find it very interesting that people think it's unusual. And I think it's a strange place for us in the games industry that it is considered unusual that we get inspiration for our stories from our own lives.
That was terrific. And thank you for sharing that, by the way. I will go on to the next question, if that sounds good.
Of course.
So I would like to ask that the game specifically touches on the gay, bisexual, and pansexual themes, which is nice, but not often touched upon, or is uncommon in a lot of games, and especially narrative games that we see a lot coming out recently. What made you decide to include these themes in Fragments of Him?
Well, if I was going to go for a one-sentence answer, it's because I am inspired by my own life, and I'm a bisexual man. So it seems pretty simple that I would put a bisexual character in there. It's probably easier for me to write a bisexual character than it is for me to write a straight character or a gay character. So yeah, I mean that's the easiest answer, really. I'm just writing from who I am and what I know and how I love and how I see the world. On a more complicated one, when we actually made this game to begin with as a Ludum Dare prototype. It was just like something we made in 3 days, and it was actually the audience response to it that made us continue to make the full game. So that was almost exactly 3 years ago, 3 years and a week ago, that we finished that Ludum Dare prototype. But when I was creating that, I said to SassyBot, because I'm actually collaborating with SassyBot. SassyBot are a company, 2 guys, Elvin and Tino, who are awesome people who I've known for quite a few years now. I'm actually just collaborating with them as a designer and a writer, so I'm actually outside of the company. I work for NHTV University, but we got together to make this game because we all kind of thought it was worth making. But yeah, when we got together with the guys, I said to them, look, writing a story, and the first prototype was just Harry's section, so the last section of the game. And in it, Will doesn't feature in that part. And so I said to them that I don't think there's many gay relationships in games. I think it would fit very nicely in this one. Completely respect your choice if you feel uncomfortable with that. And they just went, why would we feel uncomfortable about that? It's just people in love, isn't it? Being Dutch, that's the wonderful reaction you sometimes get from people. So they're 2 lovely Dutch guys, and to them it wasn't even a question of why would you? It's just like, well, why are you even bothering asking us? Just
right.
You're writing about love, you're writing about relationships. This one happens to have 2 guys in it. All right. So, and it just, to start off with, it was that simple. It's just like, it was pronouns. And we could have said fragments of her, and that first prototype would have been exactly the same. Obviously, when we looked at extending this, we then had to, like I say, I've been writing for years. I've been writing animations and stuff like that. And so one of the things you do when you write is you try to find a combination of characters which is interesting and dynamic and has different personalities and different views. And so, of course, one of the topics they would have different views about is about sexuality. So obviously Mary's character comes in there. Part of it is looking at a much more positive, open memory of Will that's not so immersed in the grief. And so Sarah was necessary. Sarah, who has lots of good memories and is not grieving in the same way as the others. And Harry has a different kind of relationship there. And each of the 4 characters has their own full arc within it. Each of the 4 characters have their own opinions, their own views, their own history, and their own background. There was originally a 5th character, which was going to be one of Will's co-workers. But frankly, that character didn't really do anything different enough from the other 4 characters to justify their inclusion. And so it's really about just trying to create 4 different people with 4 different perspectives with their own personal journeys. I mean, so if you look at Will's perspective, it's more about coming to terms with responsibility and growing up. Sarah's is a kind of coming of age story of herself and how she learns to be responsible for her own feelings, and how she can become responsible with other people's feelings. Mary is that she's got to this stage in life and the world has changed, and how she can adapt to that, and how she can still continue growing when she thought she'd stopped growing. Harry obviously is the more profound moment of how do I come to terms with this situation. I'm trying to say all these things in fairly vague sort of terms so nobody gets too much spoiled. But each of these characters is very dynamically built to have their own structure and their own journey to go on within that. So sometimes when people kind of go, oh, it's a gay game, I go, well, it's featuring people who've got a gay character, bisexual character, and 2 heterosexual characters. Is it a queer game? Well, if you say the presence of those people makes it queer, then okay. But equally, you could say it's a game about the elderly because you've got an old person in there. And I'm happy for people to say it's a queer game. I think that's absolutely fine. But equally, I wouldn't blame people for saying it's not a queer game, because that's not all it is. It's got queer stuff, yes, but it's about love, it's about family, it's about friendship. So it's interesting how some topics get really magnified when it gets looked at. And again, with this kind of question of about how have you been inspired by your life? Well, outside video games, that's not a question you'd usually get. And outside of video games, you wouldn't usually have it's very interesting that you've included gay people. We just kind of go, oh, it's got gay people in it, hasn't it? And it's interesting how within this video game world that we've got sort of certain things which are much bigger and certain things which are much smaller. I've just tried to create something which is interesting, and there's lots of discussions going on about sort of is it a proper game and stuff like that. And I completely respect differences of opinion in this one. And if somebody says it's not a game, I'll go, fair enough. Did you like the experience? Did you find it interesting? Because we've tried to create a really interesting experience using this interactive media. Now, if people want to think that's not a game, that's up to them. Personally, I think it is a game, but I can respect that other people have different sort of opinions about this. That was a very long answer to a fairly simple question. But
I was about to say,
complicated.
You actually answered my second question. I was going to ask in reference to the gay, bisexual, and pansexual themes. Unfortunately, I have to use a Nintendo reference because it's all I can think of, but the new Fire Emblem games came over, and they had to be changed a little bit in America because they had homosexual partners in that game. There was a huge uproar over it. And of course, people responded one way and another. I'm glad you added in that comment in the extra part of my question, because you literally answered what I was going to ask, which, how did you deal with opposition to people saying, yeah, it's a queer game, or it's a gay game, or going farther than that and saying something more vulgar or inappropriate? And I'm glad I heard a response from you, Mata, that was so open, because that actually goes to show more for what your game reflects onto people as they play it. Yeah, I think that's incredible of you that was an incredible response without even prompting a question, and I thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm not quite sure what I did that was so good, but I'm glad you liked it. But no, it's funny. I mean, this is it. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be people within LGBTQIA, the queer community, who are going to go, actually, no, that game doesn't speak to me at all. I don't recognise myself in there. And I'm sorry that we couldn't do that for them. I hope there are other games that can do that for them. That'd be awesome. I'm certainly hoping there'll be some bisexual people out there who recognise some of the themes in this and can see they've had those feelings and those conversations themselves. But I know it's not going to represent everybody, but not all games are supposed to, that's the funny thing, really. So
yeah. The other thing is you independently aren't out there to appease 2 billion people. You were creating a game that you felt was special, and the OPN crew share that feeling because we did thoroughly enjoy it, Heather, the most. And it is, I am just going to say it again. It's just nice to hear a nice, even and reasonable response about opposition like that, because you just see on the internet specifically, you just see a lot of terrible opposition, and it's very hard to see someone that puts a lot of time and energy and emotion into a game just for someone to take that and just crush it. And it's nice to have a good response to the opposing attitude.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about crushing things. Like I just kind of go, well, there's going to be some people who don't like this, and that's okay. You know.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. All right. On to the next question, please, Heather.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I was looking, but while my game was installing, I'm like, I want to learn more about it. I found a YouTube video of someone reviewing Fragments of Him from like 2013. Yeah. And this was like a completely different game almost. And I'm wondering, like, how long have you been working on this, and how did it evolve into what it is now?
Okay, so that was probably, likely chances are that was from a YouTuber called Cinnamon Toast Ken, who's awesome.
Exactly right.
Very lovely. So yeah, Cinnamon Toast Ken, he did a lovely playthrough of that. That was actually the first prototype. So we made that prototype in 3 days. That was a lot of recording. That was. I literally recorded the script for that under a towel on a clothes drying rack with a little cheap microphone, I designed the whole thing in the weekend. Tino did all the art in the weekend with a couple of other people helping out, and Elwin did all the programming. And that was the first prototype, and that prototype was played by. Well, it's over 60,000 people now on Congregate. It's pretty hard to play now. It's because it's a really old version of Unity and stuff like that. But it is. But if they want to play the full version, I would recommend not, because it's got a lot of stuff that's very similar to the full version eventually. So the question is, how did that become the full version? So if people have seen that, then they'll see a very bare world, very simple, repetitive actions, much more repetitive than the final game, but arguably the final game is repetitive, but that's a different matter. So part of the way that actually came to be a bigger game was that SassyBot had been making lots of prototypes that year, and this was the one that had the most passionate response. This was the one that they had people from all over the world going, "Oh my God, that's beautiful. I'm really moved by this," or "I just lost my father, and playing this game has helped me realize where I am within my grief process." And that was one of the things that really sort of made us motivated, was that it wasn't people only talking about relationships or specifically gay or bisexual relationships. It was people just talking about loved ones and losing loved ones. And so those kind of responses really motivated us to look at how we could expand on this story. We applied to Media Fonds. Media Fonds is it's a bit like arts funding within the Netherlands. And the Media Fonds, the Dutch government sort of, did fund a portion of the game's development, a fairly small portion, but it was a big help anyway. And so that kind of pushed us forwards with making the full thing. And so that was 3 years ago we made the prototype. I think it's 3 years and 7 days exactly, actually, that we finished making that. We released 3 years and 1 day to when we came out. So it's very close now. But yeah, so that was 3 years ago, and it's been a long and interesting journey along the way. The prototype has been shown in everywhere from Finland to San Francisco. So a lot of Europe, a lot of America. Always had really nice responses. Actually, I say that always 99% nice responses. Not everybody likes it, but again, can't please everybody.
Nope.
So yeah, long journey.
Terrific. So I do have a question about the pacing of the game. The pacing of the game tends to be a little bit slow. You have to go through, you have to listen to what everyone says, and the things that you can click on merge into the story and add a little bit more depth. One of the characters is American, and we understand that you're from the Netherlands. Have you received any feedback from players in other countries And do they share the same view as you or people that have been reviewing the game?
So rephrase the question.
So go ahead, Heather, see if you can go ahead.
No, sorry. I sent a list of questions that we're going off of. Basically, I was the reviewer. I did love the game, but at the same time, I was like, this is definitely a bit slow. And I was like, okay, you know what? It's the grieving process. It's learning about, love and loss. Like, it should be slow. But simultaneously, I'm wondering if that's just me being American and like, come on, we got to have a fast, like, paced thing here. Like, I'm wondering if you've had like different feedback from different, countries.
Way better phrase.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Well, in regards to the speed of it, there were a lot of discussions in the team. There were a hell of a lot of discussions in the team, and so we've got this kind of thing that we've got a lot of things to say, and there's a lot of talking to be done, and we also wanted to kind of have those people doing things that kind of fitted in with what they were talking about. So there's kind of a scene where Mary's sort of talking about, things get overgrown if you leave them too long. But at the time, she's left her relationship with Will too long, and that's kind of getting overgrown. And so there's a lot of things in there which are kind of drawing this kind of parallel between trying to get things sorted out in your life and the actions that they're taking in the world. Whether people get those, I don't know. I'm really hoping that people do go through this and take time to go through it and kind of go, why is this action paired up with these lines of script? I think it's not a spoiler to say, there's a bit about 2 minutes into the game where you've got the choice of kind of going down the stairs or getting the lift with Will. And if you choose to get the lift, he kind of goes, I'm feeling a bit trapped in my relationship. And we've put him in the smallest space in the entire game when he's talking about feeling trapped. And so we're trying to constantly kind of get these layering things in there. So part of that is because you need specific lines to be played at specific times. The other thing was simply that we knew that there were going to be lots of things highlighted in the world. We knew there were going to be lots of things going on there. Now, people could have kind of run through the whole game going click, 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 click. And then they've got half an hour of watching dialogue to come, and it would end up like a cutscene in Metal Gear Solid. And we didn't really want that. We wanted you to actually be doing stuff while that talking was going on. Did we get that balance perfect? I don't know. I think we've done a pretty good job. And there's talk about whether it should have been kind of auto-click, that you look at something that's highlighted and then it gets clicked for you. I quite like having the player go, right, I'm ready for the next bit. And if they don't want to, they can go off and look at the bookshelf, or if they're particularly moved by a moment, they can take their time over it. Which I think it's one of those balances of like, if you do it one way, you've probably lost something, and if you do it another way, you've lost something else. And so we've just tried to create a system which we know is not perfect, but we think it's got a better balance overall than other systems. So the pace was always going to be slow. That's the nature of it. But we were also kind of, I think in the end, we just went, well, if people don't want to into the dialogue, they're playing the wrong game. So it's a bit brutal, perhaps, but that was the answer we had in the end.
Excellent.
No, yeah, I agree with that, because this isn't, it is a video game, but it isn't like, a shoot 'em up or a roguelike. Like, this isn't, for lack of a better term for a genre, it's an interactive narrative. So like you say, if you like these kinds of games, you will like this game a lot. And I do like these games, so this was wonderful. I had one question, maybe not so related to the game, but you've made a lot of waves in media. I think Polygon's picked you up, IGN, lots of different places. I'm just wondering, is this something that I do marketing, so from a marketing standpoint, did you reach out, or is it that your game just was so inspirational and original that people just picked it up organically?
It's been quite organic. We've gone to quite a few conferences. We've talked to a lot of people there, but it's literally been people coming by our booth going, huh, that looks interesting. And I'm going, okay, sit down, watch a trailer. If you're still interested after watching the trailer, let's talk about it, and then I'll show you the demo. So it's been very organic in that people have just been walking past, thought it looked a bit different, looked a bit interesting, and a conversation starting from there. So that's certainly where some of it's come from. Some of these people, I don't know how they found it. They just have. Other stuff, we have been working with a PR group in Brighton in the UK called ICO Partners, and they've been really great. But they've got their kind of pre-established network of small, mainly European sites, and they've done a fantastic job. Actually, if you ever want to see what they talk about and how good they are, there's a guy called Thomas Reisenegger, who's done a couple of talks online. So look up ICO Partners, ICO. His talks about marketing for video games are really, really good. So if you want to know more about marketing for video games, ICO Partners, look them up. They're really good. His talks are fantastic. But yeah, I actually saw one of Thomas's talks at a conference, and that's actually how we started working together, because I liked his stuff so much. I was like, yeah, I want to work with you. I think you seem like a nice guy. So there has been some stuff which is from their pre-established network, but a lot of the bigger ones in America particularly has actually just been people who've seen us at conferences or heard from other people who've played at conferences. And I mean, as you say, we've been picked up by big people, which is lovely. It's not 100% positive, but like I say, nothing ever will be. And, you know, I don't expect everybody to like what you make. It's like being a musician. I mean, would you expect everybody to like every song you write? Of course not. That'd be ridiculous.
Exactly.
And so while I've poured my heart into this game, and I know some people are very moved by it, some people are really going to hate it. It's the nature of it. I hope there's other great experiences out there for them. I mean, there are, because video games, there are so many of them out there. So I hope the people who do like it love it, and the people who don't, there's great games out there for them to play.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I did notice is when I was looking at your Steam page, like I was like combing through the reviews, and I'm just seeing positive after positive after positive, and I was like, wow, like I'm happy people like this, because I'm like, yeah, I like it too, guys. But what has been like your reaction to the positive experience? Like how, I mean, it must feel good to like get your like baby out there, and then people are actually responding positively to it.
Yeah, and it's been really moving. We've been watching some Twitch players playing on it. We've watched a few, not all, but we've watched a few of the YouTube playthroughs. We really, really much prefer it on the YouTube playthroughs if people put their own commentary over the top, because otherwise they're just doing a screen grab of our entire game. And we don't feel that really adds much to the community. If people are going to do a Let's Play, for a start, it's a narrative game. So people watching that have to know they're going to get the entire story spoiled for them, basically. So I'd very much encourage people to play the game, to buy the game, to go through the game themselves before watching a Let's Play of it. But we've been watching some of the Let's Play and Twitch players, and the people who are adding their own commentaries. It's been really, really beautiful. Some really, really nice stuff on there. There was one I watched earlier today where actually the person recorded themselves after playing the game, phoning up a friend of theirs to tell them they loved them. And it's just moments like that. I was literally bursting out in tears listening to this call from this guy. It was just, yeah, it's beautiful. That feels absolutely lovely. Of course, I'm a creative person. I'm an artistic person. So when I see negative things, of course, they upset me. But you know, you've got to just balance everything out, haven't you? And like I say, I completely respect people who've got a different opinion. Doesn't stop it hurting a bit, but yeah. I completely respect that. That's fair enough. But it's been lovely. I mean, I think at the moment it's something like 80% positive on the page. And that's better than we could have ever expected, really. I mean, with a game like this, which we know is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, to have that many people be so positive about it is lovely. It really is.
Definitely. Sorry, Rob. I think we have like time for maybe one or two more questions.
Okay, I did have a very quick one, if that was okay. Only because I am curious. So specifically on the Steam page and several other pages, your game is categorized in a walking simulator. I would not categorize your game as this. I would describe it more as like a visual experience. in short, what would you describe Fragments of Him, the actual genre, if you could give it one kind of your own genre? I would like to know.
I've got two ones. One is the sensible one, and the other one's the pretentious one that is I'm half joking about.
Give us pretentious first.
Go with pretentious first. Okay, it's a pine. It's a playable interactive narrative experience. We are slightly joking when we say this, but it's. I think it's useful to kind of use those kind of terms because it recognises that there's a lot in here which is not considered traditional gameplay.
Yes.
Interactive experience, interactive narrative experience. They've, for a start, got horrible acronyms, but they're also just really long terms, and it just doesn't trip off the tongue. PINE, playable interactive narrative experience. It's nice, it's short, it's got a really nice acronym. I think it does actually quite summarise the feeling of the genre we're going for here. I think it does kind of get that sense that it is a bit different. It's perhaps a bit more organic, and it's a bit more natural, and it's a bit more about who we are as people. Pine has that kind of feel to it. If I was going for the very sensible answer, though, I'd say it's a drama. It's a drama.
Oh, terrific!
Yeah.
That's a very good descriptor. I would agree.
Yeah. I think there's a lot in common with Fragments of Him and theatre. I think games are so often compared to movies, but I think actually it feels a lot more like theatre. Our game, it feels like being on stage with actors a lot more. So I think that's perhaps something that a drama I think fits it. Now, I don't think there are that many dramas in video games at the moment.
No, I don't think so either. I think your game is extremely distinctive amongst like the video game community in general.
Yes, I hope people support the difference and buy lots of copies, but we shall see.
Of course. Heather?
Yeah, maybe just like one last question here. Is this a genre that you think will be ever embraced by like the AAA community, or is this like better suited for the indie, community?
I think there's a big question. I think there are parts of what we're doing that I hope that kind of high-end games are going to sort of take on board as perhaps things to do in cutscenes, or as a way of dealing with cutscenes, and perhaps a bit more of a moment-by-moment sort of a way of telling those things and ways of kind of interacting. Whether they actually do or not, that's up to them, of course. But I think it could be interesting as an addition to kind of these kind of high-end games. I think it's also. It's interesting that people like Ubisoft have stopped saying things like AAA and indie. They've started saying high-end, kind of mid-core and low-end gaming. So kind of the low-end gaming is more of the stuff which is quick, disposable, it's fast to make, it's probably a lot of fun, and it's great, but it didn't really cost much money to make, and it's a bit cheap and cheerful. High-end stuff is stuff with good production assets, and so Candy Crush really is high-end gaming. It's got brilliant art assets, the sound effects suit it perfectly, it's a really well-tuned gameplay experience, and Assassin's Creed is high-end gaming. It's got brilliant art assets, the audio really fits, the animation is fantastic, the whole experience, the whole narrative of that world is really perfectly tuned. So I think it's really interesting that you can kind of almost move on from this indie AAA division to just kind of go, it's polished. Mm-hmm. Now, having made this game for several years, it takes a hell of a long time to polish something to the level we've got to. I think a AAA gaming company could do this, but trying to make this amount of really, hopefully everybody agrees, well-written narrative, I know not everybody does, but working on something with this much heart and soul and really trying to bring out this really individual creative experience is a lot of work, and I think it's going to be quite challenging for other developers to do things like this. I hope they do. I think with bigger teams it will become a lot more manageable, but SassyBot is really Tino, Elwin, and it's myself working alongside them to create this, and that is it's a challenging scope that we've put down for this game here. So I think it shows what talented people can do with enough dedication, but it's quite hard work to make this kind of stuff. So whether there's the return on investment the big high-end company productions want, that's a big question. So if you made 100 people making this Fragments of Him, you're very unlikely to ever get your money back on that, I think. I don't know if the audience is big enough yet. Maybe in 50 years, it will be, but at the moment, I don't think as a gaming industry we're quite ready for this kind of stuff as being mainstream. But maybe in a few decades' time, when it's easier to do it, perhaps that'll be a more interesting way of doing it. In terms of indie stuff, I think we're already seeing there's a lot more people tackling these kind of stories. So, yeah, and hopefully it'll be something that people might pick up on more over there. But it's been a hard slog making it work and look like this, and so I think we've created something very unique, and I hope that other people do emulate part of it, or at least we're inspired by it. And I look forward to seeing what they come up with. I really, really do.
I am too. I can once again tell you that the OPN crew really adored your game.
Cool. Thank you very much. Very kind
Yeah,
of
of course. Heather, do we have anything else?
Yeah, I think Fred wanted to mention something real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, guys, actually, if I can jump in, I'm on the call. I hope you can hear me.
Yep.
Matt, thanks a lot for answering all those questions. Before we close, I kind of want to extend on that last question. And you talk about the audience and whether or not the bigger, more general audience is kind of ready for this. And I guess my question to you is, what is that audience? Is what concerns you really the fact that these games, you're not going to play those games and get. So this is not Amélie, if you've seen the movie. This is not something that really takes you a joyful experience. You're going through deep emotions on the negative end of things. So do you feel like that's when you say I don't know if the audience is that big? Are you really talking about an audience that may not, that the size of the audience that's willing to look at video gaming as a vehicle for you to go through the very same emotions you're going to get in a movie, and that's very acceptable in a movie? Is that the audience for you?
I think it is. Well, there's no think about it. The people who enjoy this game are going to be open to emotions that are outside the normal spectrum of mainstream video games. I think there's no doubt about that. There are a lot of deep and heavy emotions in here. I hope they also realize that there is kind of an uplifting ending in many ways. There's a lot of kind of reconciliation here. It isn't only about grief, it's about coping, it's about moving on, it's about finding peace afterwards. And that's actually a very heartwarming emotion. So while there is negative stuff in there, there's actually a hell of a lot in the game which is actually about positivity and opening up to other people and love, warmth.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you're really not the first one to kind of expose us to those games, even though the whole movement is very new. That Dragon Cancer, for example, if I can quote that game, came out a few months ago. Tremendous game, terrific success. So these games are coming in from the indie scene, the entire movement and motion is picking up at a fast pace. Indie gamers are in the many. They're excited, and quite frankly, I think the indie gamers are also the AAA gamers. There's not really that distinction there might used to be 10 years ago. So I really feel like this team of artists who are moving and not really caring about what's mainstream, what's gonna sell, is actually defining a whole new genre that's up and coming. And the gaming, I don't know if I'm being idealistic, and you may feel that way.
I think you are a little bit, actually.
Yeah, but very possibly. I'm just opening that window because I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and I don't know if we've truly established a market for this kind of stuff yet. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years, and I think we're going to see it kind of happening around. I think you had Dear Esther as a kind of a big landmark, and I think you had Gone Home as a big landmark, and this year we've got a few more on top of that, and I think in maybe a few years' time we'll see what's happened after this year's stuff. People kind of get inspired in waves, and games take years to make. Like I say, we've been making Fragments of Him for 3 years. Before I'd ever played Gone Home, I'd finished the script for Fragments of Him. So, it goes in loops, it goes in cycles, and that might mean that we build an audience gradually over the years. It might be that it might be that in 15 years' time that you have people who kind of go, no, I only play dramas in video games. Just like today, we have people say, I only play strategy, or I only play first person. Yeah. But I don't know if that is really there yet. I think there is people around, but like you say, I think indie gamers and AAA kind of gamers, the mainstream high-end gamers, there is a big crossover there, and I think that's really healthy. I think that's really great. I don't like us kind of segmenting ourselves too much, because I think it's really healthy to get inspired by each other's creative stuff, and I'll play a hell of a lot of different types of games. don't always like a lot of them. I'm not a big strategy
You're not the only one.
But I think it's really healthy to just kind of play different stuff and see what this medium can do. For me, I think that's a really great way of doing things. As a games designer, I get inspired by other people's ideas. And it might not be a game I like, but I can still find it interesting. I think it's important to kind of respect games as a creative medium and get inspired by each other's work. Even if it's not your thing, it's great to experience it.
Yeah. And I really feel like, I know we've got to go. Heather is signaling me that we've got the next interview coming in, but I really feel like it's contagious creativity in many ways, and it's only shaping the industry, the indie gaming industry to begin with, for the much better. We get sick and tired, us who are exposed to a lot of indie games. Some of them are great, but the top-down arcade shooter, the 8-pixel made with RPG Maker, like I really feel like the indie scene right now is benefiting from all those, I hate to say it, but pseudo-depressive artists who have something better to say, who actually want to use the indie scene as a vehicle to tell a real story about life itself. And I know we gotta go, but I want to close on kind of tying that to Telltale. And I hate to draw a comparison or even a connection, but they're kind of the ones who are making the boldest moves as far as mainstream goes, and saying, no guys, like the video gaming industry can be a vehicle for storytelling. So I want to close on your opinions of that studio itself, Telltale, how it influences smaller studios in the indie scene, and if you even think of it the way I do, as kind of the trigger of a bigger movement here.
I think we're so early to actually say whether this is a big movement or not. I think we're going to see consistently more these kind of drama-focused, more narrative-focused games. But we have been here before. In the 1980s, we had a lot of text adventures. And those kind of became point-and-click adventures. And then 3D came out and point-and-click kind of died. And then when the kind of download market came back in again, it's really interesting to see narrative coming back into the fore. And we see a lot of AAA developers or high-end developers really talking about their interest in narrative. We see a lot of repetitive kind of themes coming through there. I think Telltale are doing something really interesting, and I think they're doing something which is quite challenging and quite different. Whether other people can kind of do a Telltale, if they can kind of get that trademark feeling of involvement whilst actually keeping it very linear, it's quite a tricky thing that Telltale do. I think they do something very ambitious and very brave with a lot of their products, and I think they make experiences which are very finely crafted. So it's not as easy as it looks. If I were to leave with any one thing, I'd say get really good narrative designers involved soon on your teams if you want to make this kind of stuff. So I think that's the point of Revolution, is just getting good writers involved as early as possible.
And they don't always have those good writers. It's I mean, even them struggle at times. I think it's a real art to tell.
This is a difficult medium. And the rules of this medium, we are making these rules up as we go. And it may be that in 20 years' time, people look back at Fragments of Him and go, my God, that was brilliant. Maybe they look back and go, my God, that got so much stuff wrong. And I'm thinking it's somewhere between the two. But I'm hoping it's something that people do at least kind of go, that tried something interesting.
All right, well, thanks for answering my questions, Mata. That's it for me.
Thanks for the question. Cool. So, Heather and Rob, I think we have to roll up, really, don't we?
We do. I know.
I hate it.
I wanted to talk to you more about that. You have such good responses. You're truly an enjoyment in this entire interview, and I want to thank you on behalf of OPN for coming and visiting with us.
Very welcome.
To say just a third time, because I want to say it again, entire crew enjoys your game.
Thank you very much.
To a lot of us.
I hope your audience does as well. If they're interested in it, please go to the Steam page, pick it up, and have a look for yourselves. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's 10% off this weekend. Finishes, I think, on Tuesday, so do pick it up with the next couple of days if you're interested in playing.
Exactly right. And with that, Heather, I think we're going to be giving away a game key.
Yeah, well, we'll post it in the chat. Mata, you're gonna get we'll send you the links to all the interviews. It's gonna be published on OPNoobs.com, PC Gaming by PC Gamer. So thanks for tuning in, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for chatting, everybody. Nice to see you all. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.